Excellent. Welcome everybody to another session of Lead What Matters, the Human Connection. So Carrie and I are really delighted to have James and Alan with us today, and we've titled this one Mirror Mirror. So post-COVID, people relationships are now being formed a lot using the sort of hybrid delivery. And we've got two excellent people to talk to us about human relationships and the impact of post-COVID world as well, in how we are creating and connecting. We all know that our well-being in the world is very much about the quality of our connections. So it'll be a really great conversation today. With us, we've got Alan Stevens, who heads up human pattern recognition. He's the creator and host of the #WeTogether initiative and the Campfire Project. So Alan will talk a bit more about himself, but he certainly is really focused on building stronger relationships in your life, in your work, and in your interpersonal relationships, and even maybe the little people in your lives. James is focused on helping couples transition into parenthood with confidence. And I think the with confidence is probably the important part of that sentence. And he talks about the ability to juggle and manage chaos and not feel guilty. Wouldn't that be a really nice experience? So we're very happy to have the two of them here today. And I guess to get started, we're just interested in sort of hearing a little bit about you and what got you involved in focusing on the human connection and human relationships.
Well, in my case, it was all about the fact that I was terrible at reading people. I'd been through 2 divorces, a lot of broken relationships. I'd had business partners who had emptied the bank out. And I've raised 3 boys on my own as well from the age of 4, 11 and 12. So I've had an interesting time with getting to understand what made people tick. And so through a progression of different areas that I worked in, I picked up different skills and finally created rapid trait profiling, which has now been recognised as quite unique worldwide.
Excellent. Thanks, Alan. And James, what got you involved in wrangling relationships at the brink of parenthood?
I know, right? Thank you so much, Celia and Carrie, for hosting today, and really appreciate for being on the show today. A really good question. I had a really interesting and colourful upbringing. My dad moved on when I was the age of 5, and I think that was the best gift that I could really receive, because I had 2 choices. I could go down and follow his path, or I could learn from that and go, I think communication is a really big impact on relationships here. What can I learn and what can I take away from that? And that, at the young age of 5, probably subconsciously sparked the quest of learning more around communication. Ventured off into the health and fitness world, which communication, once again, is a huge impact on helping people to achieve, the health and fitness goals, which moves me into the coaching space. And more recently, where my wonderful wife, Nat, she's a midwife, and she teaches a beautiful program called Calm Birth, and where it helps couples transition into parenthood with that confidence. And I saw, there was a beautiful course that it offers, and we personally went through the course with our 2 younger kids. And we've got 3 amazing children. But I saw a gap with that communication piece with fathers or fathers to be. And that's where I thought, from my background, from 1, my upbringing, from 2, the tools and the techniques and the strategies that I've used and help people, and the gap that I saw around helping dads and couples transition into this amazing journey called parenthood, allowed me to put together a program called the Real Dads Program, which we cover things like, respect, emotional awareness, adaptability, and loving, and how does that play out in parenthood. So it's been a beautiful journey, so appreciative, and it's excited to be here today.
Fabulous.
Celia, it brings to mind that the human connection here is linking Alan's expertise and what it is we know and how we can put it into action, and humans are really the connection that make it all possible. So we called this series Lead What Matters. And so it is great to have Alan here as well as James, because they're going to give us a fantastic example, I believe, of applying what Alan has been studying and perfecting and growing over the years to what James is now able to do. And I've got to say, James, I've got 4, they were little ones, so I've got 4 grown-up children, and I probably could have done with a few early lessons. And I think there's a major hole in preparing to be parents. It's such an important role, and we see it nearly every night on the news. We see it in the newspapers, in the media. We hear the dreadful stories, but there's so many great stories. So that's why we've got both of you on today, because you've got great stories. So, Alan, I'm curious, you've got a particular method that you use. Do you want to share that with us?
Okay, well, first of all, and this may sound a bit woo-woo to some of the people who are listening, because your facial features tell me your personality, which means if I've got your photograph, I've already got your personality.
Too late, Carrie.
Too late, Carrie. I've seen you before. I know I've got your personality already. And so with that, and very quickly explaining how that works, if you lift weights, you'll build muscles in your body, like doing bicep curls or tricep extensions, that sort of thing. Depending on how you do those extensions, depends, like tricep extensions or the bicep curls, depends on how you'll actually build the muscles up. So you can look at, say, a bodybuilder and understand exactly what sort of exercises they've been doing, because to sculpt their body, they use those exercises to do that. At the same time, everything we feel inside, we express outwardly. That's why the micro expressions and the body language work. And we can read somebody's emotions from that. You put those together and you know straight away that when you're working on something, you'll concentrate and you'll pull expressions while you're working. You know, how many times has somebody made a comment to you while you've been doing something and made a comment about the expression you had? Well, you do that over and over, excuse me, you're going to build ridges and crevices on your face, which therefore become a roadmap of how you like to think and process. It's your personality. Once I've got that, I then know how to change the way that I like to be spoken to match the way that you need to be spoken to. And then I get that connection. Well, now I've got the body language and the micro expressions that give me the feedback to tell me, have I read you right? Is there something emotionally going on? And thirdly, are you telling me the truth? And so I'm using the truth seek, the working out whether the person is telling the truth, not as a lie detector, but as a truth seeker, because I want to know what's going on. How can I build a better relationship? If I'm trying to sell a product or a service, for instance, I can pick up something's wrong with that person in their emotions. Stop selling. Start finding out what's going on. Build a connection. Build loyalty with them, and then they want to buy from you without you trying to sell to them anymore.
Yep. And I was reading a really interesting paper a few weeks ago, and it was about the problem is not conflict management. It's actually about managing agreement, because people often agree without actually really meaning to agree. Like, well, not that they agree because it's kind of the easier path. And I think that happens a lot in workplaces, in leadership, is that people just say, yeah, let's do it like that. And yet their actual thoughts and feelings about it are quite contrary. And I think that there's a real place for that truth seeker piece there, isn't it, Alan?
Well, very much so. At the same time, if you know the other person's personality, teams are made up from people who have different personalities, because they like doing the things that you don't like doing and vice versa. But in that, because we have different personalities, that's when we have clashes. So if we're able to read the other person and talk to them in the way that they want to be spoken to, we're able to then get that great relationship with them, have the benefit of them doing the things that we don't like doing or can't do, and doing the things that, we do the things that they don't like doing. And we have a strong team and we have an understanding. You may not want to go on holidays with them on the weekends, but you're glad they're there on Monday. Whereas if people don't have the skills, they see people who are different to them and they clash with them. And they're missing an opportunity to a great relationship. But then finding that skill of being able to read what's going on and turn it from finding out, the person's lying to me. Well, why are they feeling the way they are? What's going on? How can I help them in that? And you build a stronger relationship. As James knows, and that as a parent with young children, if you're able to connect at that level, you really then have a better bond with them, and the child is more connected to you. Because one of the biggest issues today, by the time the kids are young teenagers, they're no longer connected to their parents. They're connected to their peers, and quite often the advice from their peers is not that good. But if they're still connected to their parents, it's you're able to continue guiding them, because I keep saying, as a parent, your job is not to be a carpenter or a sculptor. Your job is not to turn them into something. Your job as a gardener, and that's to nurture them so they become the best version of themselves. And in doing that, they know you're nurturing them. They feel connected to you. You've got the boundaries and everything else in place that help guide them, and you've got a strong bond with them.
I like a good metaphor, and they're really useful, aren't they, when you're thinking about all the different ways to look at it. But what I think, Alan, what you're talking about here is that you're hosting the possibility of better relationships. So when you host a dinner party, you do a whole lot of planning, you do a whole lot of strategizing, you have people with different skills come in and different conversation to add to the dinner party. You select who you think will probably have a robust conversation but will not be breaking the china against the wall, right?
Yeah.
So that's the type of thing. And then you get to be part of the conversation, but you also get to step away. You get to be able to move out into the balcony or into the kitchen, and then you'll go, oh, well, next time I'm going to put so-and-so together and we'll see what happens, or we'll do. And so I think for post-COVID, we've got a whole lot of comment at the moment about the hybrid workplace, but we've also got hybrid family environments as well that we've lived through. So James, jump in here as well. And I think that's the interesting thing about using the face profiling skills with the relationships and, young parents. I mean, fancy bringing a baby into the world during COVID. Now, I had one of my children was a bicentennial baby. That's 1988, right? Tells you how old I am. He was number 3. But there's going to be all these generations of COVID babies, and all the different stories. Yeah.
So true, Carrie. And I just want to dovetail of what Alan said previously and share a little story around that. I've known Alan for, a number of years now. And when my 2 younger kids, Lily and Tiger, were young, he profiled both of them. And I remember he clearly to this day, this is about 5-6 years ago now. And he said to me, he goes, with Tiger, he's a soft little soul, but if he ever chucks a wobbly, just put on some music and watch him just step out of that and flourish. And over the years, we've done that. When he's chucks wobblies, we put on some music, and next minute we're all dancing and singing around the kitchen. It's just been a beautiful transition. And then with my daughter, Lily, he started to laugh. I said, why? What's so funny? He goes, good luck with her. He goes, she's one strong-headed woman and young lady. And as soon as she can, she'll be out of there. He said, just let her fly, let her go. And it's just been amazing to see both of their developments with the information that Alan's provided to really nurture them and allow them to step into their own powers, which has been beautiful, which then correlates to, as we transition out of these times, for example, even in hospitals today, a lot of the partners cannot attend the appointments with the mothers. That mothers have to go in there alone. There's no doulas. There's allowed to go in in a lot of hospitals at the moment. It's only the partner. So there's a lot more pressure that's happening and even the wearing of masks, which once again, how do you then navigate through that being a partner with the mother of your child through that and the communication piece. So once again, it's interesting times. It's a pressure on, both that family unit having children through these COVID times. And then what happens, the biggest impact is that these couples come home and what happens is that there's no support because of restrictions, because of, you can't travel and this and that. These couples are left to their own devices. And this is my biggest concern and worry right now. Thank goodness some of the restrictions are being lifted, but these people there's no roadmap, there's no manual, there's no IKEA handbook to go right, step 1, step 2, step 3. And so therefore, mostly historically, we rely on the family unit to support that and to really allow that community, that communication, that family unit to help one another but that's been lacking, and that's a concern. That's something that needs to be dealt with.
Mm.
Mm.
That's an interesting turnaround. I think we're all because there's a lot, culturally speaking, there's a lot of traditional family culture that goes to the support of a new family, as well. And we're highly multicultural in Australia, but they're all over the world. We respect what culture does and what culture is, and so we've now got, dare I say, a culture of isolation, of some type of panic and fear around, will I get sick? Will I get sick? We had, I think last week, a ward of babies in Melbourne who somebody had gone in and they were infected with the virus. So we've got all these consequences as well. And so parenthood really is an experience that can be joyful, that can also be quite destroying. And then we move to mental health and possible issues around that. So, I'm wondering if the maternity hospitals or wards have actually gone in like this virtually as well. So it's an interesting thought, because Alan, this is where I think that we need to talk to you about, and James, about this. If we have a hybrid workplace and a hybrid family environment, how can we best use the virtual connection? Because we're missing out on that physical touch and energy that goes around you when you're next to somebody and you're picking up on how they are. You probably don't even have to look at their faces to know how they are, because you're already picking up on body language and sort of that energy field. So that's where I'm curious about what it is we could really do to learn to do this better virtually, because I do believe there's a lot of people who will now only want to work like this.
And you're right, a lot of people will want to work from home, but just back to the nurseries, first of all, one of the biggest impacts on those children is going to be the lack of touch. And because they're not being held, they're missing that connection. So they're already putting them in a state of semi-isolation, which is going to affect their growth. And so that's an issue. So that's always going to be a problem. Anything we do virtually is not going to solve any of that. Where they need to be picked up, they need to be held. And they need to be able to hear the heartbeat of the person holding them, because the breathing of that person, the rate of the heartbeat as well, it's soothing, it makes them feel safe. So that's going to be a problem that we have. When we come to the hybrid side of things, well, again, there's a lot of different interpretations of hybrid out there at the moment. Some people are thinking, well, if I work so many days in the office and so many days at home, that's hybrid, but it's not. In education, hybrid is doing these two jobs at the one time, like the teacher having a class of students, but also having a live show going at the same time, not doing the thing twice, but doing it once and delivering to two parts. And so I've given presentations before where, down in Melbourne back in April, to some dentists, and there were dentists that were in other parts of the country who some flew in and some wouldn't. They were on Zoom. So there was about 4 or 5 that were on Zoom watching the presentation through the day. I realised that when I delivered, I wasn't delivering to them because I was just looking at a camera, whereas I had about 40 other dentists in the room to talk to. And so, yes, you can deliver to both, but can you connect with both at the same time? That's the thing, because it's not so much whether you can talk and put something out and present. The whole thing is, are you actually connecting with the other person? And I see their faces. If I'm on stage and I'm doing a presentation, I'm looking at all the faces around the room. I'm getting feedback from all of them. And I can pick up their emotions. I can pick up what's going on. I can move around the room. I can come close to them without touching them, without standing over the top of them, but coming in a way in which I draw them into the conversation. And that's one of the things that we're going to miss on that side of it. But yes, you're right. A lot of people are going to want to work from home because there's another connection that they weren't getting when they were travelling to work. If I go to Sydney, for instance, by train, it's an hour and a half each, or actually no, 2.5 to 3 hours each way. And then there's 6 hours of the day gone. And I know a lot of people in Newcastle who work in Sydney. That's time you don't get with your kids or your partner. And so
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the clients that I've been working with recently has just sort of looked at, in the last 12 months, the men in the workplace have taken 50% of the carers leave, which has not been an experience in the previous times. And it's just, there's a shift happening that I think people will not want to give up. It's that, there's a potential to have a more a time with less commuting, basically time that you don't do very much with, and more flexibility about how you arrange your day. So I think you're right in terms of there's some real pluses out of that experience where people have seen that they can actually be part of the family unit and be part of a workplace. It's just, what changes do we have to make so that we can actually make the virtual connections real, is what I'm hearing you say, Alan.
Celia, just on that, like, I know that Nat, my wife, has been delivering her courses. She was delivering them in the hospital, where each month she'd be delivering 2 courses in the hospital, where all the couples would have to come and sit around in the workshop room. Obviously, for the last 8 months, that's been online. Numbers haven't dropped. Actually, numbers have remained the same. And what the feedback that he's been getting, and once again, this is the perception, thinking that they wanted to go into a workshop style room to be delivered the course, and I'm knowing it through my dad's as well, is that the benefits of delivering the course online via Zoom in the comfort of their own home, with their pets sitting on their lap, with women when they need to go to the loo, they can go to their own loo, right? We know what's pregnant women and bathroom errands, right? And also having your own kitchen and fridge and so forth, all at like 10 meters away from you. And I think that in itself has provided some huge breakthroughs. And I think the other thing is, what we're noticing is when the comparison syndrome, and what I mean by that is when you're in a workshop doing a face-to-face workshop, what I've picked up over the years is a lot of people looking around the room and comparing themselves on, oh, what are they doing? Or what are they doing? What are they doing? Where when you're delivering it via Zoom, there's a lot less of that. There's a lot less of, oh, what position are they doing? Are they getting it right? Are they look at her, top, or look at his shoes. Oh, wow. It's less of that comparison syndrome. And what I realized is that when you then go into, for example, Zoom rooms or breakout rooms, the depth of which people go to, it's absolutely amazing. Like, we ran a dad's program, and within 5 minutes of connecting, some of them were coming out crying because they just opened all up quicker, rather than if they were in a workshop style face-to-face live. They're all live, but if they were all in the same room together.
Yep.
So there's just some similarities and some differences between like the positives and maybe the not so positives of the both.
So at the end of the day, everything's got a positive and everything's got a negative. And it depends on having a look at what that is and working out what's the intent here. What do I want to get across? Which is going to be the best situation for somebody. We've run men's groups where we've had men in rooms, small numbers. Yeah, they open up, they share their whole life story, and almost immediately, because at the same time, it's not a full room. When I do a workshop and I'm teaching people how to read faces, I'll send them into different corners working in teams, but they can still hear each other. There's the interference of the other voices. There's also looking at what's going over there. If somebody's laughing, for instance, what am I missing out on?
Yes.
If you're doing it online with a room where you've got a small number of people in there, they're uninterrupted. And then again, you look at the technology and go, right, well, if somebody's got a question for me, I can't be in every room at the same time. So Zoom have put some features in place where they can call for help. You can go into the room, find out what's going on, then bring everybody back in, then send them back to their rooms and all that sort of thing, so that you'll have that isolation where they're in the group to be able to focus, but then you're able to bring the group together. So there's advantages in that. When it comes to delivering, I won't deliver a live presentation, and if it's my control, I won't have a Zoom running at the same time. As I said, I can't do both. But I'm finding on Zoom, especially when the internet's running smoothly, I can pick up so much information anyway. Okay, I can't pick up the body language from what's down below the screen, body movements in the hands and feet and everything else, because I'm moving my hands at the moment. You've got no idea what I'm doing with them. But when I pick them up here, yes, you can see them.
Yeah.
So
Please pick them up here, Alan.
Lunchtime, Alan, come on.
so with that, I just got what you put him off out there. I wasn't thinking about it. I should have known I was talking to Celia. Okay, let it go, Alan. You just open your mouth to change feet. That's all I'm doing here.
But you know, this is such a rich conversation because you know, there's pluses and minuses, but I want to bring it back to the human connection is what's making this work, whether we are face to face or whether we're virtual. And I just think that's the magic that we've been given, a pandemic that's allowed us really to appreciate that the human connection is the ultimate, and how we can be better at that. It's fascinating. And so I'm going to say to Alan and James and Celia, my question is, give us an example of something that we need to be able to be more expert in for, say, let's say the next 5 years. Just say this pandemic the virus continues to mutate as its job is. So what will we need to do for the people, the clients that we work with, our beautiful family members that we haven't seen for years or months or whatever, for those difficult people that those personalities that we work with or we bump up against in the workplace. So what is it that we would need, do you think, to sharpen up? And, from your expertise, from your toolkits, from your experience, and for reading the future, because we're being a little bit, we just need that crystal ball at the moment, don't we? What's it going to be like? Everyone's going, what's going to happen? What we love to have a bit more certainty.
Well, before we even look at our particular skills that we bring to the table, there are some tools that everybody's got. They're born with them, and hopefully they're fully functional on all people. And that is, you've got 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth. I always say to people, use them in that proportion. Now, when you hear things, you listen to what's being said as well, not just hear it and go, yeah, I hear people talking, but really listen to it. Take time to actually understand the other person without taking a reaction to what they're saying, going, right, that may have triggered you, but what did they actually say there? What was their intention behind it? What's their real meaning? But use your eyes as well, because the body gives away so much information. We can all pick up whether somebody's happy or sad or angry, any of those things. But concentrating on that, you'll really pick that up. But when you use your mouth, make it to ask questions more than you actually make advice. The record today is they say that when somebody is telling a story about something that's going on in their life, on average, it's 19 seconds from the moment they start until somebody is giving them advice. There is no way you can get that information in that period of time. One of my sons said, well, what should I do? And I said, you ask people questions. I said, well, when I run out of questions I had in my mind, what do I do then? I go, well, by then you'll have more questions. Ask those as well. The more questions you ask, the more you qualify it, the more that you fully understand that person. And guess what? Because that intent you put into that with that person, the focus you put in there, they recognize that. They're picking up your energies and they're already drawn towards you as well. So this is how you're talking about human connection. It's the first connection is at an energy level. When you walk into a room, you can feel what the atmosphere is in the room. You know whether you want to be there or you don't want to be there. Well, be the person who creates that atmosphere where people come into the room and they want to be there. And then after that, I'd come back and I'd talk about the skills of being able to read people.
And James, that's true. Sorry, Alan, but that's true even on in an environment like this. You still create atmosphere. It doesn't necessarily need to be in a physical environment.
That's it.
Yep. And that's so true there, Alan. And I want to share a little story. Our social enterprise, which is called the Business of Smiles, that Scott Carson, a good mate of mine, are in together. Thanks to this amazing gentleman with us today. He introduced us, and last year he goes, Shorty. Friends call me Shorty. Shorty, there's a interesting guy that I want you to introduce I want you to introduce to. His name's Scott. I said, okay, cool. He's in Melbourne. Yeah, no worries. We hit it off like two peas in a pod. It was absolutely amazing. And over the last year where we've come together and our goal was to, and it still is to run from Sydney to Melbourne. It's 1,200 kilometers to start 10,000 conversations to around the mental health crisis that's happening right now in Australia. And our mission is it's time to reconnect. It's time to bridge the gap. And that time is now, and all starts with a smile. So these are the socks that we have that actually starts those conversations. And these socks, as you can see, they've got little black dots, and those black dots are the dark days that we face, and we all have them. It's not, it might be hard with the green screen, and the yellow around those dark dots. That's the sun. That's the nice winter warm sun. That's your family and your friends and your community getting around you in your dark days. And the other day, because we couldn't do our run from Sydney to Melbourne, which was supposed to be in September, we did a virtual run. And so Scott was in Melbourne, I was up here in Lennox Head, and we went out for the day and we handed out these socks. And this is all about human connection, because there was a gentleman that actually went with Scott. Now, last year, he was suicidal and an ice addict, but Scott coached him, mentored him, and helped him to get on that straight and narrow. And he went out with Scott for 41 kilometers to hand out the socks. And so this gave him the ability to actually learn how to have conversations. And the biggest thing that we said when we're out handing these socks out is thank you. I see you. I hear you. I acknowledge you. Here's a little gift. How are you doing right now? And that's the ability of that human connection, where right now we are disconnected. Right now there is a gap. And so by coming and acknowledging them and just seeing them, hearing them, and as Alan said, listening to them. I was crying for most of the day the other week when we were handing out these socks, because the stories that we were being shared with, total random strangers. But because we had the connection, we connected with a smile, because they saw my crazy socks and these bright yellow shirts with a big smile on it, enables us to create a safe space and just to acknowledge them. Thank you for being the best version of you right now and doing your best right now. And so once again, when we talk about human connection, it's about that acknowledgement and about that listening.
I want to add something to Alan's 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. There's a Chinese character for listening, and it involves the Chinese characters for 2 eyes, 2 ears, twice as much listening and observing than talking, but it includes the heart, a symbol for the heart. And so, James, what you've just talked about is the heart. And anything that we're looking at research-wise from the big research houses around the globe are talking about love and care. That's a very interesting seesaw that's going on. Some people can talk about caring for your people in your business, your organisation, your families, right? But really, it could be akin to love. So, not everyone wants to love the people that they work with, but as a team, you would be caring for each other, and you'd want to know if they were doing okay.
Yeah. And Carrie, the question is though, like, what is love? And particularly what is love in the workplace? I work with a lot of business owners that are also parents to help to bridge that gap, that chaos, the juggling act. And every conversation I ask them when they feel stuck in the workplace or they feel stuck at home, the question I find, which is a very impactful question, what would love do? And that question, it just opens up your heart straight away. And you chunk up to a higher purpose, you get out of your ego and you sit with it, you breathe into it. What would love do? And the first thing that comes to you, boom, let's act upon that. And it's such a beautiful question, particularly in the workplace. It just takes out the ego.
That's what I love about that, because the word love is different to every person. And so when you ask them, some people will use the word, they'll say, I love being here at work, but they won't say, I love my workmates. So but that question, what would love do? Just so powerful. It just opens things up. We've found that men in particular are holding a lot of stuff down. And when we started the one-on-one conversations in the Campfire Project, the men just really started opening up, and it would only be a couple of minutes and we'd be hearing all the stories from their past of what they went through. And they come away from that dreading it when they first came on, thinking, why am I doing this? We do the one-on-one and then they go, why haven't I done this before? Because it was holding that space, and but there was also the heart was in there as well. Everything was done. Somebody comes in for a one-on-one, they're not going to be questioned or anything else. We sit, we hold their space. Everybody knows I like to talk, but in some of those conversations, 45 minutes have passed before I've actually said a word, after I've introduced the person. And only when I talk, it's only when I can add to the conversation, turn what they've been talking about into a conversation. And not once do I ever give advice to anybody, because I have to be asked. And the moment somebody stops listening, I stop talking. So it's got to be something that they have invited in. And this is what happens. I know that with one of the gentlemen that Scott spoke to in in Melbourne, he was talking about his son who was suicidal. He gave him a pair of socks as well for his son. He got a phone call the next day from the father saying that his 17-year-old son went to bed wearing those socks. So the connection there. So they were actually not just asking what would love do, they were doing what love would do.
And I think the other thing that I've heard you talk about, so for me there's two things that I take away, is that what would love do, but then also how do you really demonstrate to someone that you've seen them? Is what I'm hearing from both of you. Years ago, I went to a leadership conference, and there was a lady from Africa there, and she said, I just want to start this workshop with a gift for you all. And she went and stood in front of each person and said, I see you. And then moved on, and I see you. And I'm wondering, and listening to both of your stories, it really is not necessarily about facilitating a space or, doing that sort of thing, but it's actually opening up, giving people the experience of being seen.
So when you do a workshop and you're facilitating a workshop, you're doing.
Yeah.
But when you're seeing somebody, you're connecting. So would I be right in saying that while she was saying to people, I see you, she also touched some of them as well?
Yes, she did.
And so that was that real connection, because just saying to somebody, I see you, but then reaching out and touching as well. This is where the physical side of it is so important.
Yeah,
and that's so much to it.
And maybe artificial intelligence is going to make us feel like we've been touched, but I don't know that it's going to quite get there.
The thing is, then it comes into the conversation we have, and it follows up after the session. You might have a group of people on the screen, and you just feel that somebody needs to have someone to talk to again. So you get in touch with it, say, hey, how did it go the other day? That you want to talk about. And then, as I said, I find it really easy to sit and be quiet and listen to someone's story, because everyone says to me, oh, my story is not that impressive. I go, well, it's your story. You're uniquely different to everybody else on the planet. So your story is uniquely different. I haven't heard your story before, so it's got to be interesting. Please tell me.
Alan, on my walk this morning, I listened to podcasts between Brene Brown and a gentleman who's very well known in the States. Now I'm going to have a brain freeze.
A moment.
Hold on, I'm going to find it out.
Renee was talking to someone there, Carrie.
How's that? Oh gosh. Yes, Doug Conant, C-O-N-A-N-T, on finding your story. Now this is actually worth a listen. So it's on Brene's. I just listened to it through Spotify, but it's about this notion of how valuable is our story and how we see our story as, but I'm not anything special, right? Now, the way I look at it is we're all unique, beautiful, magnificent beings that were created by, a mother and whatever you believe we've created was, but we have been born into the world and we are quite magnificent. And I look at a lot of people who are put up on the media as either bad or good. You know, there's this notion of let's judge you. And I just go, but that's somebody's baby. That's somebody's precious creation. So I like to think now that, the story that we create, the story that we have, hasn't finished, because we're still here. We're still breathing, thank heavens. And I'm very grateful for that. But the story hasn't finished yet. And we have all possibility of changing that story or becoming, as one of my boys says to me, Mum, you're not happy just to be, are you? You're becoming. And I went, yeah, that's not a bad insight for a young man to have. And I'm going, if the kids have the same idea about life, well, then they will be willing to just take what comes and look for the way forward, but not be alone in doing it. And I think that's the other part of the conversation today. The people connection is about being there to support, to listen. And it's the presence, Essie, not presence as in gifts, but our presence that often makes a difference. Yeah.
Carrie, can I just jump in there for a sec? Sorry, Alan. And, you know, I was fortunate enough to be part of an interview in the Campfire Project that Alan started the other week on fatherhood. And there's a beautiful discussion around fatherhood and what that meant. And there was a gentleman in there called John Craig. And John actually shares with us in one of his uniqueness is actually he gets fathers to tell their story. And even though you've mentioned stories aren't finished, but I believe stories aren't even told. And particularly men, what happens is that, you know, they close up, they fit into this role or that role or whatever the role is, and their story of who they are and how they got to where they are actually hasn't been told. And John's uniqueness is actually through his interview styles actually records, you know, fathers or gentlemen, you know, in their mature years to share that story, because there's so much richness, there's so much history, there's so much learnings, there's so much, wow, I didn't know that. And, you know, like we all had a beautiful tear while we're hearing these amazing stories. And it made me realize, gosh, I didn't even know my dad's story. Like, you know, it wasn't spoken about growing up. It was more my mum's side. Because even though my dad left when I was early, it's like, well, why? Well, what happened before me and so forth and so forth. So I think when we talk about connection, that's a really strong piece, I believe, is to find out what their story is of your, you know, it could be not just your parents, but also your workmates or your colleagues or your friends. Just be intrigued, allow them to share their story, because it allows you to get an understanding of why they do the things that they do, their background, and where they, you know, what interests them as well. So it was a beautiful piece the other week that we did on that fatherhood.
It's so important to have those conversations. I was lucky earlier this year. I had what I called my TED Talk. Ted is 99 years old. And I interviewed him in the Campfire Project. His story's not over yet, but the things he shared with us and everything else. Scott interviewed his father when he came into the Campfire Project. He joined the panel discussions and he interviewed his father and reconnected with his father, who hadn't spoken to for many years. His father had not seen his grandson more than 4 times in his life, and never since he was old enough to have a conversation with him. And that's young Oscar. Oscar then decided he wanted to interview his father. You know, so he interviewed Scott. At the 9 years old, almost an hour-long interview, came up with his own questions, and one of them was a perler. Well, they're all great, but this one was, why is it, Dad, you can give to everybody else, but you can't receive yourself? And then young Oscar, I'd like to get him and talking with Ted. There'll be 90 years between the two of them.
That's
the power of that conversation, and for that to be recorded and then to be able to be passed down. It's like with the one-on-ones with everybody. As I said, we don't do them live. They're recorded. The person says, well, what happens if after I've done the talk with you, I don't want to have anyone hear it? And so we delete it. Is that wasting your time? No, the focus was to hold your space, to allow you to tell your story and have a pair of ears listen in a way that you've never had a pair of ears listen before. If we then get to put it into the Campfire Project for others to hear it, then that's a bonus. But then a lot of those people have said, can I have a copy of it? And I go, sure. Because, well, Ted, I know that I put it up on Vimeo. He hasn't learned how to download it yet. So every time he goes in and looks at it and shares it with other people, I get an email. And I think I'm totaling about 45 emails so far. So that story, can you imagine it going and connecting with everybody?
Yeah.
You know, we always put the call out. Anybody who comes in, we'd love to see the people who come into a one-on-one, then do an interview with their fathers, do it with their mothers. The women doing it as well, because it's not just a men's group.
Yep.
Because if we're going to fix the problems between us, we have to do it together. That's why the hashtag We Together. So shoulder to shoulder, looking at the problems, not pointing the finger at each other as the problem.
Yes. And I think the other thing that that for me is, in telling your story, it can change your story. So, you know, I was working with someone the other day, and I asked her what her leadership stood for, and she told me. And then 3 weeks later, when we had another conversation, she said, it's changed. I realized when I said it out loud, it wasn't quite like that. And I think the power of also telling your story is the power of being able to see it through another perspective, or emphasize a different part of it, or because that narrative can, hearing it back can be a real gift to sort of say that there might be something else there.
Yeah, we just focus on the story as it is, what the part we have, we repeat that and we just lock ourselves into it. But when somebody asks a question and goes, well, now what other way could that have looked? And all of a sudden you change it. So I'll give you an example. My first wife, when she left, I had the 3 boys to raise. They were 4, 11 and 12. Later on, I realised that they were going to have the same history as me with broken relationships. And I knew that my youngest, who'd moved back with his mother at the age of 16, wasn't getting on with her. So I realised by changing, I had to help the boys so they didn't repeat my history. I had to teach them to respect their mother, which meant I had to look at things differently. And I had then to communicate with her. We ended up building a relationship where she started co-parenting the kids as well then. And so she was involved in that side of it. Now, to do that, I had to change my thinking, because I was angry at her. She walked out, told us I wasn't good enough to be the provider and a husband and all the rest. But then I realised why she'd moved out, things that she didn't have solved in her life she needed to work on. And I thought, right, if I can work with her and help her, I've got to look at this differently. And I thought, instead of her walking out and saying, hey, you're not good enough, I thought, what did she bring into the marriage? If it hadn't been for the union that we had, I wouldn't have 3 sons that I love and respect. And I wouldn't have the 6 grandkids that I've got now. And so with that, by changing that way of looking at it, I've never been able to tell the story that I used to tell when she walked out. I can't tell that story anymore. It doesn't exist.
Yes.
It's completely changed.
It's gone.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just lay something on the line. So our story of us, of Carrie, of Celia, of James, of Alan, is the story of our leadership. And so if we look back...
Were you expecting that to be provocative, Carrie? We've all just nodded.
I know. So that's just telling me, okay, they're digesting it, or they, you know, whatever's happening. But I'd like to think, you know, listening to Alan's story there, in getting to know you, Alan, that is the story of the type of leader you are at the moment, from your story of whatever happened to Alan as Alan became and is becoming more. Yeah.
So, as you said before, well, I went through initiation from boyhood into manhood about the age of 50, about 20 years ago, with the Aboriginal community. As I went through, they said, right, this process is where somebody is then regarded to be a man. But what you've actually got is an empty book and a pen. And your job now is to write your story, and that book has no end. So it was already pointed out to us, if you want to be classed as a man, you have to start acting like one. You have to start developing and growing and everything else. We've got a lot of males who will go to their grave at the old age but still be boys. It's the quality of your heart. And so having that understanding and compassion for other people, to be a full human being, especially to be a complete male, to be able to pick a child up or pick up a flower and be gentle with that, to be able to cry, to show your vulnerability, all of that is necessary to be part of a true strength of a man. The ones who are trying to be the man, well, they're the ones who are missing out. They're still going to be boys when they go to their grave because they're trying to be out in front of everybody else. But if they take that role to be a man, being the best version of themselves, who do they want around them? Other people, both male and females, who are the best versions of themselves. And when you've got people like that around you, you can't help but become better versions of yourself each day. So it's a never-ending story. It depends on where you put your focus.
Carrie, I think you hit the nail on the head, and I totally agree there, Alan. Like, our story will depend on how we lead, but also our story will depend on how we love. Our story will depend on how we laugh. Our story depends on how many things we portray to the exterior part of the world. And so when we review that and go, well, what is it, or how is it that we want to lead? And does my story match those leading strengths, capabilities, style? And if so, fantastic, do more of it. If not, we'll have a good look and go, right, what can I drop? What do I need to develop? And how do I change that story? You know, as Alan said, it's never ending. It's always a continual growth factor. But I think the biggest thing is that the stopping and reviewing, which society tends not to do so much. It's just like, what's next, more, instant gratifications, more, rather than going, all right, let's stop. How are we? Like, taking a deep breath. What's working in my life? What's not working in my life? What are my key lessons that I keep on repeating, both the good, the bad, and the ugly? And then maybe, what do I need to be doing differently moving forward? And when we can constantly, have that realization and have that self-check-in, you'll see, is the story helping you, or is it actually hindering you right now, in particular your leadership styles?
That's it.
So I'm just thinking now about going back to the workplace, whatever the workplace is looking like. And, if I was a leader of a new team, now I met someone the other night who said, I've been the leader of a new team during the last 18 months, but I've never met them in person. And so I said to her, how's it been going? She said, actually, it's pretty good. It's actually pretty good. And so I'm just thinking, what is it that we could tune up, Alan? We've got our, that notion of using what we've already got. But if you had one, I suppose, tip for us all that we could use now in the workplace, assuming that we're fairly capable at listening, at being able to ask questions. Most leaders have a suite of questions that they ask just to inquire how progress is going, how people are. Is there something that you'd like to suggest to us that we could probably tune up and practice?
Well, when it comes down to it, even before we look at the things that we do and everything else, there was an attitude. Two things that I've taken on as part of my life for the last 20, 30 years. The first one was, what we do, the most important thing I'll ever learn is the next thing I learn after I think I know everything. So with that, I never stop learning. I'm always looking for more information. If somebody does give me some new stuff, there's an Arabic saying that says, trust everybody, but lock up your camels at night. And so I applied that to that way of learning. So what I do is I'll learn from everybody, but then I'll go and test it and check it and make sure it fits and how it works. I look for how valid it is. But the one thing that really drives me is that the one thing, what you do for yourself dies with you, but what you do for others and for the community is and always will be eternal. So if you come from that focus straight away to connect and be the best version, to contribute as opposed to just taking, that will automatically change the energy that you have. And we are energy beings, and people will pick that energy up. Now, you remember ago when you mentioned about that group where they've never met each other, James and Scott are a perfect example of how that worked. And I pass it over to James, because James, you guys still haven't met each other in real life. And I have to say that when I put them together, I thought, my God, what have I done?
That's that legacy that lives on and on and on, Alan.
That's it.
So they're going to the village.
You're the best one to talk about, the impact that it had and how that sort of developed and everything else, and what people can do if they are in the virtual world from here on.
And that's so true, Alan. Yeah, Scott and I have never met. It's all been virtual. He keeps on saying I'm AI or some kind of robot, and I sort of glitch out every so often, as I've been glitching out throughout this interview, which is sincere apologies. But we can develop so much relationships and testament to our relationship, but it's the ability to be there for one another. I believe it's the ability of the constant connection. Like, we speak to each other, we're like teenagers every single day, It's just like, 7 o'clock, 7:15, or throughout the day. It's just like, hey mate, how you doing? How's your day? Have an amazing afternoon. Like, what do you got on? How can I help? How can I? And it's that connection and it's that bond. I think, as people start to go back to work and as leaders, it's how do you want your team to feel? And I think that's the question we need to keep on having inside of our minds is like, how do you want your teams to feel? Do you want them to continually having that fear component, or do you want that inspiration, aspiration of like, come on, let's come together, let's reconnect? And when we can have that constant reminder of, right, what's that feeling that we want to have within our team? So what are the questions that we need to ask to instill that feeling? And I think, one of the things, and I'm going to throw it out there to the listeners, try not to have a conversation around COVID, right? Because it's very decisive at the moment. This and that, everyone's got a viewpoint, which is totally understandable, but it's also a disconnection component. So think about areas that you can have conversations around that uplift people, that connect people, that bring people together, because I think that's what we need right now.
Nice. So, Celia, I'm just thinking it's time for us to say goodbye, which has been a great conversation. I knew that do we have to go? But each of us does. So if anyone was interested, Alan, in contacting you, finding out where you are, where's the best place? You've mentioned a couple of things today, like the Campfire Project. So let's give people the best, easiest place to catch you.
Well, if they want to find out more about me and connect with me, my website's the best, and it's alanstevens.com.au. So as it's spelled on the screen there, .com.au. And if they want to find the Campfire Project, just go in and do a search on Facebook for the Campfire Project, and they'll find it there. And in about a week or two, there'll be a new website, thecampfireproject.com.au, will be up. They'll be able to come there, and there'll be a lot more information. Very
good. And of course, Alan's also, and James are also on LinkedIn, as well as Celia and I. Now, James, you've also got a company called Goals Tribe, yeah?
Yeah. So it's simply jamesshort.com.au, which helps those, business owners and parents juggling that chaos, but also the parentsnest.com.au. And that's, our programs that we run, helping couples transition into parenthood with confidence. So LinkedIn, Facebook, Pigeon, Smokescreen, all those things, easily contactable.
So listeners, if you're going up the North Coast at Christmas and New Year time, just go, I know that guy at Lennox Head.
Booked out already.
Right up here anyway. Senior Swales, you are just delightful to work with, and so we're co-hosting together. So Celia, if anyone would like to get in contact with you and your sense of humour and your expertise that you bring to the world, what's the best place?
Yep. Look, I'm always watching LinkedIn, and I have a website, celiaswales.com, so you can grab me there.
And it's been an absolute delight. Thank you for joining us for Lead What Matters, the Human Connection. We'll be on again next week. We'll have someone from the UK as well as someone from Melbourne. So that will be a joyous occasion because Melbourne's gradually lifting the masks, aren't they? So great to have you on, Alan and James. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
As always, Celia. So everybody, please hop onto Facebook. Global Leaders Thrive hosts this conversation. We are all about thriving in life and work, and particularly for leadership for tomorrow. So if you enjoyed this episode, please share it. We all like a little bit of love. Anyway, thanks everybody. Talk to you again.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Bye for now.